Welcome to another installment of Donning the Armor. This morning we will begin in Deuteronomy chapter 23, verse 1. He who is emasculated by crushing or mutilation shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. So as we continue through this second telling of the law, as Moses is telling this new generation who is preparing to go into the promised land, all the different laws and expectations the Lord has for them, we come to some random seeming expressions of the law. Different couple verses here, couple verses there, went through sexual immorality. Here we're going over who can enter the assembly of the Lord. However, the idea of the assembly of the Lord does not necessarily mean who can go and worship the Lord, who is allowed to be an Israelite, who's allowed to be a child of God. This assembly of the Lord is often thought of as the idea of being one of the leaders, one of the prominent elders of their tribes to go forth and go before the Lord. Sometimes we've seen in Scripture where they will talk about the congregation of Israel, and they'll talk about the whole congregation of Israel. Sometimes we'll mention the congregation of Israel and really only mention the elders, only the leaders of the tribes going before Moses and Aaron or before the Lord. So the idea is, he who is emasculated by crushing or mutilation shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. Anyone who has become a eunuch, who is now infertile, is not going to be allowed into the leadership of the congregation to go before the Lord. One of illegitimate birth shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation, none of his descendants shall enter the assembly of the Lord. So somebody of illegitimate birth is not going to be one of the leaders of these tribes. Until the 10th generation, none of these people are going to be in that assembly. An Ammonite or Moabite shall not enter the assembly of the Lord. Even to the 10th generation, none of his descendants shall enter the assembly of the Lord forever. Because they did not meet you with bread and water on the road when you came out of Egypt, and because they hired against you Balaam the son of Beor from Pethor of Mesopotamia to curse you. Nevertheless, the Lord your God would not listen to Balaam, but the Lord your God turned the curse into blessing for you, because the Lord your God loves you. You shall not seek their peace nor their prosperity all your days forever. So the Ammonite and the Moabite, they can't be leaders in your assembly. No one from those people who tried to curse you and led you into sin at Peor are going to be allowed to be now leaders of your tribes. They are now disqualified forever. You will not, first off, they were not supposed to take wives from them anyway, but no person who goes to convert, because you were able to convert into Judaism, none of them will ever be able to rise up to leadership. We do see this happen because Caleb was a Kenizzite, not originally an Israelite. They are brought in. He becomes a part of the tribe of Judah and becomes a leader in the tribe of Judah. Not so for these people. That is not an option because of the way that they treated the Israelites when they came out of Egypt and how they caused them to fall away from the Lord at Peor. And of course, they were blessed because the Lord loves them. Not because they're great, not because they're amazing, but because the Lord loves them. And because of their wickedness, the Israelites are not even to seek their peace or prosperity. Don't go by them. Leave them to their own designs. Let them flounder. It's fine. You seek after what I provide for you, not what they can show you. Because they tried to be wickedness. They tried to bring wickedness upon you already. You shall not abhor an Edomite, for he is your brother. You shall not abhor an Egyptian, because you are an alien in his land. The children of the 3rd generation born to them may enter the assembly of the Lord. So, Esau, Egyptians, when these people come in, They are allowed to be adopted into your tribes. And after the third generation, after they have been, 3 generations in as Israelites, then they can enter into the assembly of the Lord. When the army goes out against your enemies, then keep yourself from every wicked thing. If there is a man among you who becomes unclean by some occurrence in the night, then he shall go outside the camp. He shall not come inside the camp. But it shall be, when evening comes, that he shall wash with water, and when the sun sets, he may come in the camp. So this is speaking specifically about when the army goes out, not the encampments, but when the army goes out against your enemies, you're still to try to keep a clean camp. This is what you're told to do. So if somebody becomes unclean, they need to spend the night outside. When the evening comes, they can come back in after washing. The same kind of rules they had for the congregation as it goes through the wilderness. This is going to be the same rule that you have for the army as it goes against your enemies. Also, you shall have a place outside the camp where you may go out, and you shall have an implement among your equipment, and when you sit down outside, you shall dig with it and turn and cover your refuse. So, when you're out in the military, you're out in the military camps, you have to have a place to go to the bathroom. Don't do it in the midst of your camp. You do it out there. You dig a hole. That's a weird thing to have written in the Bible, but God is prescribing this for his people. Don't go to the bathroom in the middle of your camp. Go out, have a designated place where people can go do their business. For the Lord your God walks in the midst of your camp to deliver you and give your enemies over to you. Therefore your camp shall be holy, that he may see no unclean thing among you and turn away from you. In all that the Israelites were to do, they had to be holy. They had to be set apart for the Lord. Period. They had to do everything to make sure that they were clean in his eyes. You shall not give back to his master the slave who has escaped from his master to you. He may dwell with you in your midst, in the place which he chooses within one of your gates, where it seems best to him. You shall not oppress him. This is the idea of a slave who escapes from a foreign master, typically. Not somebody who is a bond servant, because they had different rules for that because you sold yourself into bond servitude. This is somebody from a different land. They escape their master. They come to you. You're not giving them back to his master. You're going to keep them, and you're not going to oppress them. He can now live in your midst because the idea is the Lord wants people set apart for him, not to oppress people in his name, but to treat people with love and bring people into his fold. There shall be no ritual harlot of the daughters of Israel, or a perverted one of the sons of Israel. So, in the pagan cultures, they would have ritual temple pagan harlots who would, oftentimes these would have temple prostitutes for their pagan gods. Or a perverted one of the sons of Israel would be a male prostitute, typically a homosexual male prostitute, who would then do these things in the name of the god. They would hire them out to have sex in the temple or with the people from around the temple. You shall not bring the wages of a harlot or the price of a dog to the house of the Lord your God for any vowed offering, for both of these are an abomination to the Lord your God. So, no wages that is made from somebody being a harlot or a male homosexual prostitute, which would be the dog, to the house of the Lord. You're not bringing their money to God's house. That money is an abomination because how they earned it is an abomination. Do not bring it there. You cannot use it here. You shall not do that. You shall not charge interest to your brother, interest on money or food or anything that is lent out at interest. To a foreigner you may charge interest, but to your brother you shall not charge interest, that the Lord your God may bless you in all to which you set your hand in the land which you are entering to possess. So, when you are dealing with your brethren, the Israelites, do not lend them money with interest. You can lend money, but not with interest. Nothing needs to be paid back with interest. There were interest charges when we went through Leviticus for people having to give things over or purchasing things back from the Lord to give to the Levites, but that's to help provide for the Levites. They would add a fifth on top of it. But when it comes between interpersonal lending, they were not to charge interest. They could charge interest to a foreigner, sure, but not to their brothers. They were to care for their brothers. As I spoke about when you were talking about not only the year of Jubilee, but the 7-year forgiveness of debt, it was to keep people from being, keep people from falling into generational poverty, to have an ongoing issue of poverty. If people had to keep lending with interest, they would never get back out of debt. You would be causing a class of people that would never be able to get out of poverty. Poverty would always exist. The Lord said you would always have poor people, but the idea would be to not create a class of people who were always to be impoverished in perpetuity and could never get back out because people were taking advantage of them. Oftentimes in our society now, we have predatory lending all over the place, which puts people in poverty that they cannot possibly get out from. You can claim, well, people shouldn't have put all that stuff on their credit cards. Sure, but the credit card interest rate should also not be 32%. You cannot get out from under that weight, because normally the people that say you should never put down your credit card, and this is coming from somebody that's never had credit card debt under my own name, is that bad things happen and you fall into bad situations. And the only way to feed your family sometimes is with that credit card. Not everybody is simply trying to take advantage of a system. Not everybody's out there trying to do something bad. Just because there are people doing that does not mean everyone is. And if nothing bad has ever happened to you, and you've never had to fall into debt, and you've never had a want for money, or had to skimp on budget because you had nothing to eat, you've been blessed. Because most people have not lived that life. Having grown up on oodles and noodles, yeah, I know what that's like. Even if I've never had to actually take out large sums of debt, because I've been blessed enough to be able to pay it off. When you create an interest of that, you create a class of people who cannot work their way out of debt. And that does not benefit society. It benefits people who are already enriched, creating them to be richer while other people languish because of greed. And once again, sound like a raging liberal, for which I actually am not. I'm just compassionate to people who fall on hard times, because that's what my Lord has called me to be. When you make a vow to the Lord your God, you shall not delay to pay it. For the Lord your God will surely require it of you, and it will be sin to you. But if you abstain from vowing, it shall not be sin to you. That which is gone from your lips you shall keep and perform, for you voluntarily vowed to the Lord your God what you have promised with your mouth. So if you make a vow, you're not putting it off. You're paying for it right away. You made a vow to give this son to the temple. Now, because you can't give your son to the temple because he's not a Levite, you now need to pay money to purchase him back. You can't delay in paying that. You need to go do it. Because you said it, you now need to do it. As Jesus said, let your yes be yes and your no be no. Do not make vows. Do not swear oaths. Just make your yes yes and your no be no. And that's what it's saying here in Deuteronomy, which Jesus loved to quote. It'll be sin if you don't pay off your debt to the Lord in a timely fashion. But if you just don't make vows, you don't have to worry about any of that. You don't have to worry about going through all this, because if you don't vow anything, if you don't make promises, you don't have to worry about keeping that promise. You can just do as you're supposed to do. But if you do make a promise, you need to keep it and perform it, because you voluntarily made that promise. No one forced you to make that promise. You made it, now you have to keep it. When you come into your neighbor's vineyard, you may eat your fill of grapes at your pleasure, but you shall not put any in your container. When you come into your neighbor's standing grain, you may pluck the heads with your hand, but you shall not use a sickle on your neighbor's standing grain. The Israelites were to keep a corner of their fields open for passers-by, for widows, for the impoverished to eat. It's saying, look, you can even eat your fill of grapes. All you can eat buffet. You're not taking any with you, though. If you want to stand there and pluck off a handful of grapes and keep eating them until you're full, and then continue to move on your way, you're more than welcome to do that. But you're not putting them in your pockets. You want to pluck the heads off of some grain? Fine. You're not doing it with a sickle. You're not coming and threshing your... You're not coming and harvesting your neighbor's wheat here. You're not doing that. It is for charity. You're not taking advantage of it. Which, sadly, that needs to even be said. Because then it comes into theft, which is against the Ten Commandments. Moving on to chapter 24. When a man takes a wife and marries her, and it happens that she finds no favor in his eyes because he has found some uncleanness in her, and he writes her a certificate of divorce, puts it in her hand, and sends her out of his house, when she has departed from his house and goes and becomes another man's wife, if the latter husband detests her and writes her a certificate of divorce and puts it in her hand and sends her out of his house, or if the latter husband dies who took her as his wife, then her former husband who divorced her must not take her back to be his wife after she has been defiled, for it is an abomination before the Lord, and you shall not bring sin on the land which the Lord is giving you as an inheritance. If you divorced a woman and you gave her the papers, spoke about that before, about people talking about marriage is just a piece of paper. Well, if you had to give her a piece of paper to divorce her in the Old Testament, you probably had to give her a piece of paper to, purchase, to actually marry her as part of the dowry. But if you are divorcing her because you're wicked and sinful, and now she goes and finds another husband, and something happens with that marriage, you can't go taking her back now. You can't be like, oh, well, she really was the one. Nope. Not now. You are already sinful in the divorce. You're now not taking her back. That's an abomination. You're not going to bring that level of sin on the land which the Lord your God is giving you as an inheritance. You wanted a divorce. You got your divorce. You don't get her to take her back now. What's done is done. You wanted the divorce. You got the divorce. Now you need to move on. When a man has taken a new wife, he shall not go out to war or be charged with any business. He shall be free at home 1 year and bring happiness to his wife whom he has taken. So here are some just miscellaneous laws, as the scripture likes to put in the header of your Bible as one of those headers before sections of scripture. When a man has taken a new wife, he doesn't have to go out to war. He doesn't have to go away from home. He is free to stay at home for 1 year and bring happiness to his wife for whom he's taken. In essence, to go have children, to go create this family together, to do as what the Lord intended you to do, to be one flesh, to procreate and create a greater and more fulfilled kingdom of God, to be happy. Not everything was to be separate and violent and vicious and conquering. You were to bring happiness to one another. That was the idea of marriage. So when you had a new wife, you go and you stay home and you be happy. No man shall take the lower or the upper millstone in pledge, for he takes one's living in pledge. So the idea is that you are not going to take the millstone. You're not going to take what they use to make their livelihood, is in essence what they would use to grind flour. You're not going to take what they use to make a living as a pledge in, a debt, saying, okay, well, if you lend me this, you can take this as a pledge that I'll pay it back. Also told not, if you take somebody's cloak in a pledge, give it back. That way they will be warm when they sleep, because if you take their only clothing, then they're going to freeze at night. I mean, they live in a desert. Deserts are hot in the daytime. The sand does not collect the heat like dirt and soil does, so it becomes incredibly cold at night. But they're saying you can't take away someone's way of making a living in promise that they'll pay you back, because they'll never be able to pay you back. If a man is found kidnapping any of his brethren, the children of Israel, and mistreats him or sells him, then the kidnapper shall die, and you shall put away the evil from among you. So, if you're found as kidnapper, whether you were just trying to harm somebody, if you were trying to sell them into slavery, they die immediately. Basically, what Joseph's brothers did, their punishment in this new law-given economy would be death. What Judah did would be deserving of death. They kidnapped Joseph and sold him. One of the brethren of the children of Israel, they would need to die by this law. This law did not exist at the time, and they found mercy in the eyes of God and in the eyes of Joseph, and he forgave them and brought forth this nation from them. Now that the law of Moses is given, this is much different. Take heed in an outbreak of leprosy, that you carefully observe and do according to all that the priests, the Levites, shall teach you. Just as I commanded them, so you shall be careful to do. Remember what the Lord your God did to Miriam on the way when you came out of Egypt. So, all the laws we've read are not necessarily all the laws that were told to the people at the time. They were told to the Levites and the priests. This is what you're going to do. So, now that you're going to be broken apart, you now need to listen to the priests and Levites, so that you do what you're supposed to do in case an outbreak happens, so that you can avoid becoming sick, and if you become sick, you can actually learn how you go about becoming clean again. Because if we remember, Miriam and Aaron rebelled against Moses because of his Ethiopian wife. Miriam was given leprosy herself and sent out of camp for 7 days, where she would be healed and brought back in. Some of these people were probably pretty young when that happened, but the new generation would probably remember that, at least the older ones would. When you lend your brother anything, you shall not go into his house to get his pledge. You shall stand outside, and the man to whom you lent shall bring the pledge out to you. And if the man is poor, you shall not keep his pledge overnight. You shall in any case return the pledge to him again when the sun goes down, that he may sleep in his own garment and bless you. And it shall be righteousness to you before the Lord your God. As I was mentioning, if the pledge is somebody's garment, their cloak, something they would use to sleep in, you don't keep it after the sun goes down, because they're going to freeze. They need that garment to sleep in. But also, if somebody pledged something to you, you don't get to go in their house and take it. You will wait outside while they go and get it. You're not going to force your way into their house. You're not going to go rough your way into getting it. He will bring it out to you, because that's what he's honor bound to do, and that's what you will respect as a fellow Israelite. You shall not oppress a hired servant who is poor and needy, whether one of your brethren or one of the aliens who is in your land within your gates. Each day you shall give him his wages, and not let the sun go down on it, for he is poor and has set his heart on it. lest he cry out against you to the Lord, and it be sin to you. So if you have a hired servant that's poor and needy, you pay them daily. We live in a time where we get paid every week, every 2 weeks. Well, they were to get paid daily, because if you're not getting paid daily, then you don't have food for that day. You have nothing, you have no purchasing power. So they needed to be paid on a daily basis, especially because they were poor and needy, and you knew they were poor and needy. So therefore, by withholding their wages, you're withholding food from them. So don't let the sun go down on it, because if you're doing that, then you're allowing the poor to go hungry. You are not treating your brother as you should, and it's going to be counted against you. Fathers shall not be put to death for their children, nor shall children be put to death for their fathers. A person shall be put to death for his own sin. Everyone is accountable for what they do. You're not going to punish the father for what his child did. You're not going to punish a child for what their fathers did, because that's what other cultures did. They treated each other horribly, and they escalated things to be further than they needed to be. So here, Lord's just saying, you're going to treat each person based on their own sin. Period. You shall not pervert justice, do the stranger or the fatherless, nor take a widow's garment as a pledge. But you shall remember that you were a slave in Egypt, and the Lord your God redeemed you from there. Therefore I command you to do this thing. So, you're not going to pervert justice. You're not going to victimize someone through the judicial system because they're a stranger, not of the land, because they're fatherless, because it's a widow. You're not going to take advantage of people, because you'll remember you were once a slave. You were once mistreated. You were once had justice perverted before you. When you were mistreated, you were caused to do more work with less supplies. Your children were killed before you, your firstborn sons. You witnessed all of these injustices. You are not now going to be unjust towards others because you feel you can take advantage of them. The Lord your God has redeemed you, so therefore you are to treat them in that same redemptive mercy that he had for you. When you reap your harvest in your field and forget a sheath in the field, you shall not go back to get it. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow, that the Lord your God may bless you in all the work of your hands. When you beat your olive trees, you shall not go over the boughs again. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. When you gather the grapes of your vineyard, you shall not glean it afterwards. It shall be for the stranger, the fatherless, and the widow. And you shall remember that you were a slave in the land of Egypt. Therefore I command you to do this thing. Whatever falls off of whatever you're harvesting, leave it. Leave it for those less fortunate so they have a chance to survive. Don't go doing and taking from others what you don't need. You have the rest of this. Things dropped, you'll survive without them. Leave it for those less fortunate, because you were once the less fortunate one. You know what it was like. I showed you mercy. I brought you out of that situation and gave you abundance. So when you see someone less fortunate, give them mercy and allow them a portion of provision out of your abundance. Moving on to chapter 25. If there is a dispute between men and they come to court, that the judges may judge them, and they justify the righteous and condemn the wicked, then it shall be, if the wicked man deserves to be beaten, that the judge will cause him to lie down and be beaten in his presence according to his guilt with a certain number of blows. 40 blows he may give him, and no more. lest he should exceed this and beat him with many blows above these, and your brother be humiliated in your sight. So, if there's a dispute, if it comes to a thing where somebody needs to actually be punished in this form, it needs to be done in front of the judge who gives the sentence. That way it's done properly and in the way it's meant to be. Typical scourging per Jewish law would be 40 blows, 40 lashes. It would be 39 plus 1 with the whip. Therefore, one would be merciful. In this, they're talking about blows. It could be anything. But the thing is, you are not supposed to go above and beyond. You're not to humiliate him. He's being punished. It is not to bring forth your vengeance. The Israelites are told, vengeance will be the Lord's, not yours. The judge puts this out, and this is what's to be done. This is what's to be done. You don't allow the person to go extra and exceed it. You shall not muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. That is because it would be cruel. You're not going to muzzle an ox while it treads out the grain. You're not going to force it to go work for hours treading out over grain and not allow it to occasionally dip its head down and take a bite. Now, of course, if it would stop and eat, then you'd probably whack it and have it start moving again. But it would be cruel to put a muzzle over it and not allow it to eat as it goes and just be working with no nourishment. If brothers dwell together, and one of them dies and has no son, the widow of the dead man shall not be married to a stranger outside the family. Her husband's brother shall go into her and take her as his wife, and perform the duty of a husband's brother to her. And it shall be that the firstborn son which she bears will succeed to the name of his dead brother, that his name may not be blotted out of Israel. But if the man does not want to take his brother's wife, then let his brother's wife go up to the gate of the elders and say, my husband's brother refuses to raise up a name to his brother in Israel. He will not perform the duty of my husband's brother. So we saw this with Judah's children. The second one refused to perform the duty. He took her as a wife, but then refused to actually give her a child, so he continued to spill his seed outside of her. And the Lord dealt with that by slaying him for his wickedness. And we're not even told that's the only way he was wicked, but that's what the Lord chose in that moment. But this is now laying this out in the law, this idea that the children of Israel already knew from Jacob, that they knew this was something that they were to do, which is why Judah's children did it. But here you have this being enshrined in law. And what would happen when the husband's brother refuses to go along with it? Then the elders of his city shall call him and speak to him. But if he stands firm and says, I do not want to take her, then his brother's wife shall come to him in the presence of the elders, remove his sandal from his foot, spit in his face, and answer and say, so it shall be done to the man who will not build up his brother's house, and his name shall be called in Israel, the house of him who had his sandal removed. So he's going to be humiliated because he's not owning up to what a child of Israel is supposed to be done. And now his name is now going to go forth and to be a name of humiliation among his people. If two men fight together, and the wife of one draws near to rescue her husband from the hand of the one attacking him, and puts her hand out and seizes him by the genitals, then you shall cut off her hand, and your eye shall not pity her. This is one that, written in some translations, almost makes it sound like if she accidentally touches the man's genitals. No, this is the idea that she is grabbing him and trying to rip his genitals off. She is trying to mutilate and emasculate the man in the fight. And now why you would cut off her hand? Well, if we go back to 23, we remember that somebody who was emasculated or mutilated of their genitals cannot be a part of the assembly of the Lord. So she is removing that from him. She is the one now doing the emasculating and the mutilating of his genitals and causing him to be set apart outside of the assembly of the Lord. Also, she is denying him the ability to be fruitful in having children. You can agree with it or not, it's the law that the Lord put out. You shall not have in your bag differing weights, a heavy and a light. You shall not have in your house differing measures, a large and a small. You shall have a perfect and just weight, a perfect and just measure, that your days may be lengthened in the land which the Lord your God is giving you. For all who do such things, all who behave unrighteously, are an abomination to the Lord your God. Basically, when you're doing business, you're not cheating people. See, you would have different weights if you are buying or versus selling. If you were selling, you would use a different weight than you were buying. That way you would gather more money to yourself because you'd be charging people different amounts based on weight and ripping them off. So don't do it, because the Lord does not like that. That's an abomination before him. Remember what Amalek did to you on the way as you were coming out of Egypt, how he met you on the way and attacked your rear ranks, all the stragglers at your rear when you were tired and weary, and he did not fear God. Therefore it shall be, when the Lord your God has given you rest from your enemies all around, in the land which the Lord your God is giving you to possess as an inheritance, that you will blot out the remembrance of Amalek from under heaven. You shall not forget. So the Lord is telling, through Moses, the children of Israel, remember the wickedness that the Amalekites brought on you. How they were attacking your rear ranks for your weakest people, your elderly. They would attack you and kill those people. How they did this wickedness to you, and as you went through the wilderness, they continued to attack you in this way. When you're all in the land, when you're as powerful and rested and as good as you are, I will call upon you to blot out the Amalekites from under heaven forever. You will not forget this. It's not something I'm going to ask you to do now, but when the time comes, you will remove them from existence. This happens with Saul. Saul is told to go after the Amalekites and destroy them utterly, and he does not, which is why Samuel will come to him and say, the Lord, what good is this? Do you think the Lord wishes sacrifice over obedience? The Lord wants obedience over sacrifice. You kept all of these things, all this livestock that the Lord told you to destroy from the Amalekites. And then, of course, they don't destroy all the Amalekites. They go on to kill Saul and Jonathan. When the Lord gives something like a command of any kind, we are to follow it obediently. All these laws that are so random seeming, these are the laws that the Lord has put forth. These are the laws that the Lord has decided the Israelites were to follow. These are laws that correct for us now. Christ has said, I have fulfilled all these laws for you. You do not need to follow these laws any longer. All you need to now do is follow the laws in which I'm giving you, because I have fulfilled the ones that came before. However, most of the laws that came before are now encapsulated in the laws that the Lord gave. Jesus gave 2 commandments that encapsulate the 10. To love your God, the Lord your God, with all your mind, heart, and soul, and to love your neighbor as yourself. All 10 commandments are encapsulated in those 2. We are to follow him, to place ourselves under his authority. And to do that, we need to carry out his commands when he tells us to carry them out. They might not be right now. The Amalekites weren't meant to be destroyed at that moment. But the Lord's saying, you're not going to forget. Because when I call you to do it, you're going to go do it. Because I am commanding this of you. The Lord will one day call us to command. Say, you need to go do this. I told you you would have to go forth when I called you. Don't forget, you will have to go forth. We're told that all through the epistles, that we have work we need to do for the Lord. The Lord has gifted us through the Spirit any number of gifts. And when He chooses to activate those gifts in our lives, when He chooses to send us forth with those gifts to do a work in His name for His glory, we will have to go do it. We cannot forget the command with which He's given us to follow His leading, to take up our cross and follow Him. Wherever He takes us, in whatever way He takes us, whether we really want to go with Him in that direction or not. Because as we're seeing Him turn right, we probably want Him to turn left. But we follow Him. We do it because we shall not forget the commands He's given us. And we don't forget the commands He's given us because the love He's shown us, the things He's done for us, the provisions He's given us, the blessings He's doled out upon us, and the sacrifice He made for us that allows us to be draped in the righteousness of His blood so that we can be in His presence, in the embrace of the Father. In the first place, we do what He's commanded when He finally commands it. When we're finally in that place, when we have been given rest of all of the things that we've had to do before, and we're now in a position to do this new work He wishes for us to do. When we've settled that sin that we were struggling with, that now we are now in a state to go forth and do and conquer for Him and His glory, He will send us out to go do and conquer for His glory. And we can't forget that when we hear that call, we need to follow, we need to listen. Because of all He has done before, all He has forgiven, all He has provided, all He has blessed with, and all the love He has doled out that we did not deserve. Because if we're honest with ourselves, we wouldn't have shown that love, that mercy, that kindness, given out those provisions or those blessings for someone who was like us. We would have looked at that person, turned our nose up at them, walked the other way because we weren't going to deal with that degenerate. But He did, and we shall not forget that. Because we call ourselves by His name. And more importantly, He calls us by name as His. And we repay that by following His leading, wherever it takes us. So that's where we shall end it for this morning. I hope this was fruitful for you. I hope to see you back again next time. But until then, be blessed.